world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. I'm Kev Laramie, joined by Duane Rollins as we treat this day as a Monday. So MLS Weekend Review, Canadian Premier League Review, and of course, before we start, you'll take a second and subscribe to our YouTube page. It will really help us out in our journey to 1,000 subscribers. But Duane, first of all, how are you today?
I'm doing well. As you told me off air, I'm repping the Raptors today before I run out of chances to do it. So, go Raps, I guess, anyway. But, a good Easter weekend. It was relaxing. I went to Hamilton for a while. I had all my... I went to Ford's game on Saturday. Didn't find any eggs, sadly. I'm looking for the chocolate. The Easter Bunny must have missed me.
No eggs for Duane. No chocolate eggs for Duane. Oh, well. It's too bad. And you got no eggs, too, because it was 2-2. So no eggs on the scoreboard in that game in the Canadian Premier League, which will break down the scores of the CanPL later today. We will also break down the first coach to get fired in Major League Soccer in 2022. It took 7 weeks, and Matias Almeyda is now gone. We'll break down his statistical results from his stay in San Jose. We'll talk about the multifaceted mistakes all across the board from his part, from the organization, from both of them together. A marriage set to fail from the start. We'll break that down later today in this show. But Duane, it was a busy weekend in Major League Soccer. Let's have a look at some of the results before we break down Montreal versus Vancouver. Statistically, a great win by Montreal that was very close to being a draw. What was your overall thought this weekend looking at those results in Major League Soccer?
Yeah, look, it's starting to settle in. I think having watched the games in replay now, that the teams are getting a little more rhythm. They're starting to sort of settle themselves too. Like there's starting to be a top and a bottom, and we're starting to get some surprise performances out there. The other thought I had is, a thought for Brad Guzan, a guy who's had a great career, and for that injury, for the way it happened, such a freak little thing. And I was watching live too when it happened, and when the replay happens, you can see the ankle go, and it's like, oh, joints aren't supposed to move that way. Yeah, he's 37. That could be it. And unfortunately, we've learned now that we've got major surgery on the way. So, yeah, not a nice sight. But
no, it's never a nice sight. And it's never fun to see this happen to someone, like you mentioned, Brad Guzan, that's on the back end of his career. And those are difficult injuries to overcome at that stage of your career. Yeah,
and look, in terms of on the pitch for this year, they've been snake bitten by the injuries already, right? And he's a leader in the dressing room. How long he sticks around, whether they pivot him maybe while he's in his recovery to maybe start moving him into some kind of leadership role moving forward might be the smart thing to do. Shuttleworth is the backup keeper, is fine. He's been a starter in MLS before. I don't think they're going to lose a ton on the field there because Brad Guzan hasn't been the Brad Guzan of even 3 or 4 years ago the last little while. I think he's been closer to league average for a while, but the leadership is hard to quantify. Just like when we talked with the Canadian national team, the difference between Crepeau and Borjan on the field isn't much, but when you add this leadership, it makes a big deal. So, look, it's a loss. And as I said, he's had a big career, and, it's an unfortunate way to go out, if it is.
Yeah, if it's the end, of course, it's a terrible way. Let's continue, of course, to look at some of the results. Montreal 2, Vancouver 1. We'll break that down. It was very close for Montreal at the end of this game. A result that is surprising is San Jose Nashville 2-2. Yes, even with a draw, San Jose decided to fire Almeida, and we'll break that down later. A lot of reasons why. And he basically wanted to be fired because he wanted to still be paid. He was never going to resign. He was basically said, are you going to resign? Are you going to resign? Are you going to resign? He's like, no. Okay, fine, you're fired. And he finally got his wish. Atlanta, Cincinnati, you mentioned Atlanta. 0-0 between the two this weekend. Another 0-0 between Houston and Portland. And another 0-0 between New York and Dallas. Columbus, Orlando, big win for the Lions on the road in the Columbus Crew at their lower.com field, of course. DC United, Austin FC, big win by Austin. One of the surprising results in Major League Soccer this year has been Austin's results. They are second in the Western Conference, and quite surprising this year so far.
Yeah, look, last year, if you go back like a year and a half ago to when we were doing our previews for last year, I had Austin as the final playoff team in the West. because I thought that they had built the spine kind of nice, and I thought that they might have a similar build to Nashville. Now, it didn't work out because they really couldn't find any offense at all, and they kind of were just invisible, and, they had no image. They really forgot about them. I forgot Austin played after you watch them the first couple weeks to see what it was like. Like, oh, yeah, Austin's in the league.
Oh, yeah, I remember. What's that? What's ATX? Oh, yeah, that's Austin. I forgot about that.
Yeah. But what I will say is they seem to add a little scoring. They found an ability to get the ball in the goal. And when you do that, when you have that spine like they do, which is not spectacular, but Nashville's not spectacular either, and they still keep chewing it along, right? So if you can add those goals, you can maybe get some results there. And good for them.
And we can't talk about Austin without talking about, of course, Cecilio Dominguez, who is suspended right now of all team activities for alleged sexual misconduct that has taken place, and maybe more. So we'll have a continued coverage on that story whenever we have news. Let's continue this overview of the scores before the deep dive into the statistical reasons why I think Montreal is really good this year. But New England, Charlotte, a win for New England. Finally, a dub in Major League Soccer this year for the Revolution. Toronto heading Philadelphia, their first defeat this year. We'll break that game down later on. Two, couple of other interesting results. Kansas City not getting the job done on the road. It's been a difficult year on the road for Kansas City. 5-0 this year on the road. That's quite a bad record for Kansas City, who were dubbed as a contender in the Western Conference, and I guess should have been labeled as a pretender in 2022.
Yeah, look, how much I've wondered this the last couple of years, and they've surprised me one of the last couple of years. They weren't great 2 years ago, which was an odd year, so you kind of put it on a shelf, right? And then they blipped back up and did well last year. I kind of wondered how much of their, Kansas City always be there was based on reputation, based on maybe old thinking. They don't have big spend. They don't have any depth. That's always been the knock on Peter Vermees, is he doesn't build depth. That team cannot grind through seasons in the way other teams do, which is why they fade in the playoffs. There's not a huge academy presence there. They're not churning kids through.
No, but if you look at, let's give a shout out to Graham Zusi, who on Sunday played his 350th match in Major League Soccer. That is including playoff, regular season, and MLS's back tournament, and the playoff of these tournaments, which is the differential of the two games if you're looking at his stats on MLSsoccer.com. And that's a big number for Graham Zusi. But Zusi started his career really higher up on the field and slowly but surely became a right back, I believe. So that's a big difference in the scoring mark. Johnny Russell cannot do everything by himself. And this team is led by Rémi Walter, who is a midfielder with 2 goals. The rest of their scorers has only 1 goal this year, and they have only 5 different scorers of 1 goal. You cannot be good when you have the worst attack so far in the league, as in Kansas City.
Goals win games. This is definitely on our bingo card too. It's like, defense does not win championships. Defense can make you okay, but it doesn't win you the championship. Ultimately, you need to put the ball in the goal. Yeah. And Kansas City, they did that last year. They found the offensive ability. This year, not so much. And they've never been that strong in the last few years defensively on the ball. So that adds up to wooden spoon kind of stuff if they don't turn this around. And look, Peter Vermees is so entrenched there that it's not like they're going to make a change at the top. So is he going to be stubborn in his ways? Well, and we're talking about that in a minute. So, yeah,
he kind of exactly, and he kind of is stubborn in his ways. He still plays at 4-3-3, which honestly, if you don't have the talent of an LAFC, who might be the best team in the league right now, I don't think you should be playing a 4-3-3. If you look at the talent of Kansas City, 4-3-3 might not be the answer. You cannot control the ball this way. But a team, Duane, that has succeeded with their talent they have so far this year is Montreal, finding ways to win. Yes, squeaky bum time and extra time, of course, but Georgie Mihalevich, MVP candidate, maybe front runner so far, is carrying Montreal into a playoff spot. Let's look at this result for Montreal. They have a record of 3-1 this year, a big 2-1 victory against the Vancouver Whitecaps. The Whitecaps have a record of 0-4-0 on the road this year, a difficult year for them. and it will continue to be a difficult year for the Whitecaps. Brian White scored his first goal of the season. Georgie Mihalevich scored his fourth of the season. Ramel Kyoto is third of the season, and this game finished 2-1 for Montreal. 12 shots, 5 on target for Montreal. We're looking at 84% passing accuracy, only one corner, but a lot of fouls. Vancouver also a lot of fouls, 20 fouls to try to stop Montreal's momentum in the midfield. Vancouver's going to struggle. Vancouver is struggling. Ryan Gauld might be out for a while with a second concussion in just a few months. This feels, Duane, like it's going to get worse before it gets better for Vancouver. And this feels like it's going to be a long season, and maybe his only, for Vanni Sartini as head coach of the Vancouver Whitecaps.
Yeah, didn't see any, not seeing MLS.com, soccer.com releasing any videos of Sartini pep talks so far, right?
No, andiamo. It's more nothing really.
Yeah, and did you see the Pacific gave them a little dig too? This is actually an interesting thing because Pacific, they have a DeSantos on their team, and for some reason they just made another tweet this way. The only person to win it here is Starlight. This DeSantos is the only DeSantos to win at Starlight.
Well, that's also a dig though at Valor FC because their coach is Philip Dos Santos.
Yeah, there's a lot of, well, yes, I get it. It's a lot of meta going on. There's 3D chess happening here, but there's definitely something happening there with Pacific and Vancouver because the other part of this too, look, I could belabor exactly why they're failing, and you just said it there. We've said it 15 times already. We said it in the preview. They don't have goal scoring. They were relying on overachieving to happen again. It's not happening, and that's adding up to what it is. But the other part I want to talk about is it was interesting last night. There were some high prominent Vancouver journalists talking about how little feedback, how little interaction they were getting talking about the game. There's just the fans aren't even talking about it. A lot of the older fans are Pacific fans now, even though they live on the mainland. And when there's going to be, if you don't know this, folks, there's going to be a team on mainland BC, close to where the Whitecaps play, a suburban Vancouver team, basically, in the CanPL in 2023.
Exactly. So, in Langley, just to be confirmed, in Langley, British Columbia, in the Fraser Valley, has been announced. We talked about it on last Thursday's show. You can go back in our archive to watch and get all the details on that 9th franchise in the Canadian Premier League that will begin to play in 2023, and they will play their game at Trinity Western University at their stadium they have there for their soccer team. But for Montreal, Duane, I think it's really important now that we look at Montreal as having survived their difficult beginning of the season calendar-wise, with the CCL included. Now it's 3 wins in a row, 4 games without a defeat for Montreal. They've beaten good teams and they've played against good teams. They're going to play Philadelphia on Saturday for the second time this season. Philadelphia is the best team in the Eastern Conference and arguably with LAFC the best team in the league. Montreal was able to do well against a good team recently in Major League Soccer, racking up the wins and climbing up the standings just behind Toronto in 6th position for now. Toronto is 5th in the Eastern Conference. Georgie Mihalevich is having a year so far. Not just a passer anymore, a goal scorer. It's about what he can bring, and it's about this year for Mihalevich. Next year is always in doubt when you're that good in Major League Soccer. You can always look abroad. This summer, this year, this World Cup year will be important, and I think we'll continue to see the rise of our Georgie Mihalevich with CF Montreal, and his eye and taste for goal is going to continue. Montreal was looking for a striker to get the job done and put 10 goals into the back of the net. Well, I guess they just needed to turn around a little bit and not look at front, but look at the midfield. And look at Georgie, because Georgie's the answer for Montreal this year.
And you're starting to hear a lot of chatter and down south side about whether he deserves a look in the USMNT and possibly even to get in the conversation for Qatar, right? I think that at this point in time, although Greg Berhalter has said that he's going to bring a first-team lineup to the Nations League, because he's kind of stuck in his ways, Greg Berhalter, in terms of the players he calls up. I would wonder whether you might not want to have a look at Georgie in that window. I think it's a mistake for Canada, the U.S., and Mexico to bring the first team. I think you should be going B team totally in that window because you need to look at these players to fill out the back half of your roster. But nonetheless, and to get back to Montreal, look, they had a road-heavy schedule to start their season. And everyone who's watched this league for more than 2 seconds or even watched football for more than 2 seconds knows that you get less points in the road than you get at home. So if you start to turn that around with what's going to be a happier summer schedule in Montreal at Saputo Stadium on nice summer nights in the city, then you have the chance to get up that higher up that calendar. And Georgie, if he continues to play the way he is, although we all know the factors of why he probably won't get MVP consideration, I think among those that know, he will be one of those guys that talk about it in that way, that you'll have the experts going, well, he's the most underrated player is, and that's okay.
Well, the chatter has already started, though, and I think the players are aware of it because Alistair Johnston, before the game on Saturday, during the week when he was talking to the media and to the broadcast, he was saying that, don't forget about Mihalevich for MVP. That's how he's doing already. So the campaigning has started already for Mihalevich. So that's what you need to start your campaign early when you're in a Canadian team for a trophy in Major League Soccer, which has never been done outside of Giovinco. Giovinco did win the MVP in 2017, right?
Well, Pozuelo won in 19 as well, but
Pozuelo, I forgot. It's true. Yeah. Pozuelo did win in 2019 the MVP, so it wouldn't be the first time at all. Not at all for a Canadian team. It would be the third time, and the third time is the charm because it would be in Montreal this time. Let's now look at TFC's result, Duane, because TFC is the first team this season to beat Philadelphia. First team to give the Union a defeat in 2022 in Major League Soccer. It was Easter weekend, and of course on Saturday, Jesus scored a goal. Jesus Jimenez on Easter Saturday at the 39th minute put the ball behind the net for the first goal of the game. But for the second goal of the game, because just a few minutes before, Julian Carranza was doing his best impression of, I guess, who's the one who betrayed Jesus, Duane? Do you remember that name? I know that I think it's Thomas. No, Thomas the one who didn't believe, right? So Thomas the one who touches the wounds. Anyways,
that'd be Thomas, yeah.
That'd be Thomas, all right? But Julian was not part of it. But Julian scored at the 34th minute. Jesus with the tying goal. And the 2019 MVP, Alejandro Pozuelo, scoring the go-ahead goal at the 51st minute that became the game-winning goal for Toronto. 54% possession for TFC, 73% passing accuracy, which is not high, but compared to Philadelphia, it is higher than them. 66% passing accuracy for Philadelphia. That's their worst number this season for Philly, a very low number in Major League Soccer standard. But I think Toronto got a little bit lucky here. 15 shots, 5 on target for Philly. It could have been different if the ball would have been bouncing a little more left, a little more right on certain shots. You're still looking at a good result, and Toronto was able to hold on and keep the 3 points at home.
Yeah, it's a scrappy with the win. I mean, the kids are all right. This is all part of the process. Not to, speaking of my Raptors shirt, trust the process. 76ers winning the series probably. Look, it is a process in Toronto, and Bob Bradley, I think, has them slightly ahead of schedule. And you have to like that. Now, look, there's still questions. You look at Philly's goal, and maybe there's a conversation to be had about the defensive midfielder, which is a very famous player in Toronto's history, and maybe he's not a defensive midfielder anymore.
Talk about someone that has family ties with
my hairstyle.
Family ties with maybe the coaching staff too, maybe.
Yeah, look.
Maybe captain of this team. We're talking about Michael Bradley here.
Yeah, and I am not in the, put him on the bench camp when it comes to Michael Bradley. Especially when you're in the stadium, you still see the way he sees the field. He still pings a pass cross field better than almost anyone in this league in terms of being able to hit a 40-yarder to switch the field. He has value. I just wonder whether he's an 8 now. I don't think he's at the back. I think he's too slow. He's not quick enough, but he still has that vision, that passing vision, that ability to still kind of break up plays when they're not coming at him a million miles per hour. But when he gets deep and you're relying on him to make last-second athletic defensive plays, well, his age shows. And that first goal, you'll notice that they just get a half step. It's a good goal by Philly. They scored with 4 guys around him, so it's a good finish. But still, Bradley shouldn't let that shot in, right? So there's the question to be had there. But I don't want to belabor too much on the negative. You're right. On a different day, Philly likely wins this. I think Jim Curtin was secretly happy they lost the game, though, because he's talked about how maybe the plays hasn't matched the results so far, and he wanted it to be a wake-up call. Good result for Toronto.
It's not good for Montreal, though, because Montreal are playing Philly, and now Philly's coming off a loss. So that's not great for CF Montreal for next week. But, that's we'll cross that bridge on Saturday.
Yeah, look, when points on the board are never more important than the points in the pocket.
Bingo
think I'm
card.
mixing it up there.
Bingo
right now
card.
for Toronto. Yeah. Because they got the summer. They've got a guy coming in the summer. I'm not sure if you're aware of this.
I have a little sound effect now. So bingo card.
There you go. There you go.
All right. So now that we can continue, and we'll, of course, break down the standings after the break, we'll also look at maybe the most shocking result of the weekend. Not the fact that they won, but the fact that they won by 6 goals. So we will break down NYCFC's results after the break. And I'm looking forward to breaking down the standings because it's week 7 in MLS. And after week 7, it's week 8. And week 8 is, well, almost a third of the season, which is crazy. We're almost a third of the season through in Major League Soccer. After the break, we'll break down the standings, we'll break down the Canadian Premier League results from the weekend, and we'll talk about San Jose and Mr. Palado Almeida, who is back in Mexico and not in San Jose anymore. But until then, we'll take a short break, and we'll be right back after this.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Kev Larme joined by Duane Rollins. Please take a second and subscribe to our YouTube page, available at youtube.com/Sports Podcasting Network. This is a good way to help us out. Subscribe to our channel. Subscribe to our YouTube feed. Our podcast feed also available everywhere you get your favorite podcast. Another result that was impressive to me this weekend was New York City FC winning against RSL. Not the fact that they won, but the fact that they won by 6 goals. The fact that Valentin Castellanos, a.k.a. Tati Castellanos, scored his 4 first goals of the season. He had 0 before the beginning of this game, and he finishes with the second biggest total in the league after scoring 4 in one game. 2 of those come from the penalty spot, and the young upstart Thiago Andrade scored twice. No win, no goals for Real Salt Lake in this one, but it's still a good season for Salt Lake. They have a record of 3-2-3 this year so far. 2-3-1 the record of New York City FC. 22 shots, 12 on targets. That is 55% of their shots were on target. No wonder it was 6. It could have been 7. There was a mercy VAR there that took away the 7th goal. It could have been worse. It could have been by a touchdown, Duane.
Yeah, it could have been 10, honestly, having watched this game. And quickly before I move on, we're talking about NYCFC of City Football Group. Just so you know, Tuesdays are for Europe, except when they're on Wednesdays on a holiday week. So we will talk about City going out of the FA Cup tomorrow. Don't worry. But to get back to this one, I mean, what I think the biggest takeaway is how many home stadiums have NYCFC played in this year? Like
a couple for sure. Well, they played a home game in LA in the CCL. They played a home game in New York a few times, and they've played this one at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, they've been in New Jersey. And I think there was City Field next weekend too. So like this is a lot. But when they are at the little pinball table that they play home games at, the indoor soccer field there, all they need is the boards around it, and it's going to look like the old star, like the Baltimore Shooting Stars.
It was the MASL playoffs a few weeks ago, right? So
we don't talk about the MLSL very often on here. I think we did it once, maybe, but anyway.
Yeah, and then we looked at the ratings. We're like, okay, we're not doing that again.
Yeah. Nonetheless, look, it had its time and place. However, that stadium has a time and place, and that's now for NYCFC because they're very good in it because it's such a unique environment to play in. And I think RSL, a team that is, sort of a gung-ho and stay together and play teams, once they started to get rolling down that hill, the talent wasn't there and the legs weren't there, and they're playing in an neutral environment, and it got ugly, and it got ugly real quick. You could tell even in the first half that it wasn't going to be a pretty game for them.
No. After a few minutes, because I was preparing the game I was working on that day, so we were broadcasting the LAFC Kansas City game on TV Sport later on. So I was working on the broadcast, getting this ready, and I was watching at the same time the NYCFC game. I was like, geez, every time I was looking up, there was a new goal. I was like, another one. And another, I thought I was DJ Khaled for a second. I kept saying another one. All right, let's look at the standings after this week 7 of play in Major League Soccer. And to me, it's surprising to see the amount of points on top of each conference. Philly 16 points, LAFC 16 points, 2 teams on top of their game, even though Philly came off a loss. 2 teams that are really hitting all the cylinders right this year in Major League Soccer. Orlando second in the Eastern Conference, New York, Atlanta. It's a question of time for Atlanta. They will trickle down with the absence of Josef Martinez, Matias Rossetto, Brad Guzan, and that's just a few of the big names injured in Atlanta. I expect Toronto, Montreal, Chicago to catch United really quickly. Charlotte just off that red line. Not a bad beginning of existence in Major League Soccer for Charlotte. We need to look at their defensive ability because they don't have a lot of goal scorers, but I guess they didn't allow a whole lot of goals, and that's why they have 9 points so far after 7 weeks of play. In Major League Soccer, Columbus, NYCFC, with their victory, they got off the bottom. New England also not a laughingstock anymore, but only 1 point away from the bottom. DC United is now at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Quite surprising, Duane. And then we can move to the West. LAFC, Austin, and the LA Galaxy are dominating the Western Conference. Dallas and Houston, still surprising. What is in the water in Texas in 2022 that sees the MLS team become successful? Because not even a few months ago, we had all 3, Dallas, Houston, and Austin, outside of the playoffs in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, MLS is going to MLS. That's part of this, right? I mean, you're always going to have some surprises. And we are, as much as you said, we're almost at the quarter pole. We're only almost at the quarter pole. So that's wait till, after basically the August long weekend is when I start to really pay attention real close. Canada Day, July 4th at the very minimum. Otherwise, it's all kind of jockeying to get in for that stretch run. Look, I think Houston's done a remarkable job. We're going to talk about Almeida in San Jose in a minute. And forgive me, the coach from Houston slipped my mind right now. He's a new coach. But regardless, he started the season trying to play this up-tempo. I'm going to play 4-3-3 kind of thing. And he went, whoa, this isn't working, and switched it off. And they're playing kind of a defensive solid back and sitting back and trying to defend and get results. They're not spectacular to watch. I've watched Houston play a few times this year. They're dull as hell to watch. Like, yes. Don't watch them unless you're doing it for something like this. But,
which, by the way, the coach is Paulo Nagamura, if you're wondering.
Yes. Yeah, it's me and my Spanish names. I can't remember them ever. But at any rate.
he was a coach in the system of Kansas City, too, back in a few years ago with Swope Park Rangers. So he actually learned a little bit from Mark Dos Santos. Who would have thought?
Yeah, well, he comes from the Vermes tree, and he tried to play the same way Kansas City did. There's a bigger conversation on another podcast that I listened to this week. I think it was on allocation disorder. I listen to so many, I mix them up. I'm trying not try to steal anything from anyone. I just sort of get it from everywhere, right?
Exactly.
So I want to give credit where credit's due. But nonetheless, like, he deserves credit for making that adjustment and figuring out what will work for this team. And I think that's one of the things that MLS teams and coaches, I should say, get stuck in on is we got to play this way. There's only one proper way to play. And if they bang their head against the wall, eventually it's going to, it's either going to cave in or you're going to knock yourself out. Usually it's the opposite. I don't bang my head through many walls.
No, because then you bleed also after. That's never good. That's never good. But we can now continue our weekend review. We'll move on to the Canadian Premier League and look at the result in week number 2 of action in the Canadian Premier League. Really happy to have more coverage of this CanPL this year. And here's a few of the great results we had in the Great North. FC Edmonton, York United, 1-1. Atletico Ottawa with a big result, also surprising 1-1 this year. Atletico Ottawa has been a good surprise this year so far. We have Forge FC, Cavalry FC, a big 2-2 draw, and that's an eternal rivalry already for these two teams. Forge and Cavalry have been the best teams since the inception of this league. Since the last 6 months. The last 6 months, Pacific has been clearly the best league team, and they showed that on Sunday against Valor. 3-2 win by Pacific to continue to take hold of the top of the league. Let's look at the stats in this game. Manny Aparicio scored one of the goals for Pacific. Alejandro Diaz and Josh Hurd scored the third one for Pacific, a 2-0-0 record to start the season. Starlight, Starbright once again in Starlight Stadium. An own goal here for Dadaluk, maybe my second favorite name in North American soccer. There's Ben Bender, and then there's Dadaluk. Dadaluk. Of course, Moses Dyer scored the other goal for Valor on a penalty in extra time. A red card to Tony Michael in the 26th minute. What I thought was really bad here is the amount of possession Valor did get, 34%. They didn't do a whole lot with that very small possession number. 3 shots, but 2 on target. But the rest, it was all Pacific, Duane.
Look, what Pacific, if you go back to 2019 and when we talked the original previews of this league, we talked a lot about how Pacific was building a system and had a plan in place. And unlike the 2 teams that were dominating in that first year in Forge and Cavalry, who had places to pull from, they were starting from scratch. But you could see that they were going to quickly become part of the Big 3 because of what the foundation they were laying. And that foundation is paying off now because you look at the players they've lost in the offseason. They've lost their top defender, they've lost their top scorer, they've lost their coach, but they're still able to just move forward. Now, we're 2 games in, so pump the brakes a little, but it does look like they just have a system and they can kind of plug and play a little bit. And that's going to be key for any success in this league because this league is going to have turnover. You know, they're going to have players in for 2-3 years and then they're going to move on. Like you look, they're either going to move on to a different team that's going to offer them a bit more money, like Terran Campbell, who went to Hamilton because he could get more money there. The way the CanPL structures are kind of set up, you can kind of pay the guys a little bit more coming to you than maybe you can pay them to keep you. So they lost the player that way. They lost McNaughton. They lost Chung to GFC, which is a good thing for them. They got some money back for that too. But this is a system that works, and you got to like what it is. And the other part of it, too, which has got to scare the hell out of the Whitecaps, is a lot of the basis of their team is based on young talent from BC, which really should be in the Whitecap system, but they have dropped the ball somewhere along the line.
Of course, and I want to bring a little correction. I did say that the score was 1-1 between Atletico Ottawa and HFX Wanderers. That is a 1-0 victory for Atletico Ottawa, and as you see on your screen, the standings so far, only 2 perfect teams in the league already after 2 weeks. Pacific and Atletico Ottawa are perfect. 2 wins in 2 games, 5 goals for, 3 goals against for Pacific. Atletico Ottawa, the only team in the league so far to not concede a goal after 2 weeks of play in the Canadian Premier League.
Yeah, and that's a bit of a surprise. I think a lot of people didn't quite know what to make of Atleti in their second year, what they would come into it. But, early days, obviously, but it does seem like they maybe got a little solidity there. I don't want to bash people because that's not really what I want to do. But I had heard that perhaps the coaching techniques of Mista weren't translating, we'll say, to Ottawa.
I could have told you this before the beginning of the 2020 season, 2021 season. We've seen Mista coach before. I don't know why we expected different results at a different level. But I remember when Mista was Mr. TFC. And, nothing revolutionary there.
Well, I think maybe Mista was brought in a little for marketing purposes too for Ottawa too, to help him watch with somebody that played at a bit higher level, right? So, and that direct tie to Atleti that they could play into. But anyway, regardless, maybe they've got a little better thing going on right now. A couple other round thoughts about CanPL weekend. I was at the Forge Cavalry game. Forge is not quite firing right now, is what I'll say. They had 2 brilliant wonder goals. They were gorgeous outside the box goals, both of them. And watch the replays if you haven't yet. Completely against the flow, though. That 2-2 win, and Calgary is unlucky to get a result there. Forge is trying to work in some new players. They've got some players out with injury right now. They'll probably sort themselves out, particularly since they don't have CONCACAF to deal with this year. Pacific does. That's something to watch later in the year, how they can deal with that, with the balance of that team. But so far, look, the quality of the league has improved again, and the competitive balance is there, though. Like, you look at a team like Pacific, Cavalry, Forge, look at the standings. They're not at the top right now, so we'll see whether they sort that out. But that's a good thing for the league, I think, in these early days. And good news. Particularly, one last thought on CanPL. You sort of teased it. Well, we didn't tease it. You talked about the Langley announcement. I may have some news for you in Saskatchewan next week. Not going to promise it right now, but just keep that in the back of your head. You may have some big news on you next week in Saskatchewan.
Right.
So there you go.
By the way, to remind everyone, Saskatchewan last year was announced that the rights to a Saskatchewan team was given to an ownership group in a part of town where there's going to be some changes where the horse racing used to happen. So we'll see what we can find out on that aspect of that CanPL announcement that was done last year. It wasn't an expansion announcement. It was a rights, basically a territory rights for a team in a potential Saskatoon area. Before we say goodbye for today, the first of the year, it has happened. The first casualty in Major League Soccer. First coach to lose a job in Major League Soccer was probably the happiest coach ever to lose their job in Major League Soccer. Matias Almeyda got his wish. Matias Almeyda was let go by San Jose. And it was necessary to be done because, first of all, he hasn't done really well as a coach of San Jose. You can see on your screen if you're watching us via YouTube and video on Twitter Live, 130 games as their manager. Wins, losses, draws ain't good. 158 goals, 192 against, minus 34 differential, and a 32% winning rate. 32% win rate is not good enough for a team like San Jose that is struggling all across the board for a long time. 103 games under Almeida and never could get really the result. And those wins they got, most of them were in 2019, 2020 even, when they were struggling at the beginning, but they played well after the MLS is back and they were fun to watch. But it was never going to last long. For me, Matias Almeyda was always under a countdown clock because he was too good for the job. We knew that the investment by San Jose would not follow the ambition of this type of manager, and for him to have a system that he can use, and similar to a Marcelo Bielsa type of system where he needs full commitment from you, he needs you to press, to attack, to always run, and it's very difficult to keep that type of play long term across multiple seasons when you lose your best players. So for Matias Almeyda, he was always, I guess, a bit behind his own system with San Jose.
Yeah, well, square peg, round hole comes to mind here, right? Like the idea of trying to implement that system, which is really only done by maybe 4 or 5 clubs in the entire world, which tells you how difficult it is to run. You need depth that MLS teams simply cannot have now because you need to run them into the ground, and you need athletes that are at a level that he could not get in San Jose. He didn't feel that he got the ownership support, and that's probably true, but I'm not going to take him without fault here because he's also a stubborn man, quite clearly, because he did not adjust his style.
No, you're right.
And it clearly wasn't going to work in MLS. It clearly was not going to work with the players he had. They're unmemorable right now. They are so far behind the 8 ball. They don't play really exciting teams. They've alienated their fan base. Like, one of the reasons he likely got fired after the game on the weekend, despite the fact they got a sort of result, is he tried to fight a fan on the way into the warm-up. Like, I mean, there's images of him crossing the bridge as to get there, and a fan approached him, and he had to be pulled back from him. I mean, this is a toxic environment.
He wants to be fired. He wanted to be fired.
Yeah.
He tried to resign. They wouldn't accept a resignation. And first of all, he didn't want to really resign because it's a question of money too. He wanted to put his guy, bring at the end of his contract, so we fully paid. But there's a whole lot more to this story. And this just continues the bad management of San Jose, who, let's not forget, they've won the Supporters' Shield in 2012. And since then, they made the playoffs twice. One of them was with Almeida. But since then, they've been the laughingstock. And now, of course, we'll have Wando part of the coaching staff moving forward for this year. He was part of the Quakes 2 coaching staff and MLS Next Pro. So that's positive going forward, bringing the Goonies era back. You know what I would do? Just bring Steven Lenhart and just put Steven Lenhart in charge of this team. And you know what? Come what may, but at least it'll be entertaining.
Okay, this is going way back when. We're talking about 2012 for a second here. First off, you talk about overachieving, and like we didn't really talk about advanced numbers there. That team scored so many goals, 90-plus minutes, that were almost entirely not replicable. But anyway, Steven Lenhart I have never been in the stands, and I've watched lots of sports my entire life, where the fan base is wanting to kill an opposition member as much as when Steven Leonard was playing his game. And you got to somehow, when you're away from it, give him credit for that. If you haven't seen him play, if you're too young in this league, shit disturber, does not do it justice. That man was epic at Felipe took notes from him.
Felipe learned in 2012 when he was playing for Montreal. Of course, he became that type of player. But all our best to the St. Louis Quakes fans. You deserve better. This is it's hard to say, but it's not served properly. This is a market that should be one of the best in the league. Like when you think about never mind San Jose, this should be branded as more than San Jose. You have to involve the San Francisco, the Bay Area, Oakland, Santa Clara, San Mateo, all the regions in between. Like everywhere where the BART system, which is their train system, the metro system, goes, the subway system, you need to make sure that there's fans of the Quakes. This team is a sleeping giant, but it's too bad because it's been sleeping for decades, I guess. Twice, because it slept, it left, it came back, and it's sleeping again.
Yeah, look, people, for this current edition of the San Jose Earthquakes is actually younger than TFC, right? We think of this as a long historic franchise, but as you say, they had a gap there when the team moved to Houston. They went 3 years without a team. In 2008, they came back, the expansion team, the year after. So they completely started from scratch there. Look, you're right. It's an historic market that they want to keep there. It has a lot of similarities to Columbus, I think, in the sense that there needs to be some kind of refresh there to get back some of that old joy. I don't think Columbus ever dipped as far as they have, but for sure there's some similarities. Look, this is a good start. They needed to get rid of it. They needed to tear it down so that they could start again. Wando coming to the coaching staff is an olive branch to the fans. It wouldn't even shock me if I saw him come out of retirement for half a season. Don't quote me on that, but would it shock anyone if you were to do that? Because you're probably getting training with them now.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, you can still score.
Get a little bump in attendance for the back half.
And Duane, if he comes back, he might score 10 goals. He might add to his tally and have another 10-goal season. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. There's your, I think on extra time they do like crazy predictions. They have to put one out there. So there's my crazy prediction that Wando scores more than 5 goals this year. He's starting to get retired.
This doesn't sound too crazy until you realize, oh wait, he's retired. So it's a pretty big bold prediction right there. But on that note, Duane and I will say goodbye for today as we get ready for Wednesdays, because this week Wednesdays will be for Europe. You can find Duane's on social media at 24th Minute on Twitter, myself at Kev Larme, this show at Soccer Today SPN. You can subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss an replay version of this show. You'll be notified if you click the notification bell whenever we upload a brand new show on our YouTube channel. And of course, until then, you can follow the website where you'll find a podcast version and anywhere you find your favorite podcast at sportspodcastingnetwork.com. But as always, until tomorrow, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kev Larme, and we wish you a great soccer.